digital applications are increasingly important and can be used in cardiorespiratory physical therapy. During the interview, we will discuss a special framework and examples of best practice. Hello from WCPT Congress 2019 in Geneva. I have 4 experts here in the field of cardiorespiratory rehabilitation. Amanda, I start with you. During the symposium, you introduced the Digital Capacity Framework vectors, a big term. Could you explain this?
Yes, the framework is a model that helps us to understand the various competencies that we need to develop in order to become digitally competent. And the use of a framework's very valuable because particularly with a topic like this, you wouldn't know where to start. There are so many different areas that we have to consider and learn about and make sure that we're working appropriately within, that it would be too overwhelming. So having a model, there are 6 domains within the competency framework. You could take each of those domains and consider your skills in relation to what's required. And at the end of that process, you could decide for yourself if you're digitally competent or incompetent, as the case may be. So the use of a model is very useful just to think about a concept which is very broad and difficult to actually appreciate.
Okay, then let's go to practice. Digital application in teaching is your topic. Could you explain a little bit from your work?
I can, yeah. I think the benefit of simulation is that there's so many different ways that we can apply our teaching, and digital application for simulation would be something like an e-learning model or an online, say an interaction or case study. So there are a lot of different ways that we can use those online applications in our teaching, and it gives a lot of background or ability to understand the knowledge before we go into a physical simulation.
Okay, then let's talk about data. How relevant is a big data concept for your work?
I think it's small at the moment, but it's going to be revolutionary. As I said in my talk earlier, I think that the literature in cardiorespiratory physiotherapy is littered with n equals 8 or n equals 12. And the trouble with studies which have very few people in them mean that you can't really say that the truths that you found in that study are relevant to other studies. And there's another thing too, which is even if you have an n equals 1,000, studies that are out there now are kind of point-in-time studies. So this is what we measured then. Big data studies allow us to do longitudinal observational data sets where we can make inferences about the associations between A and B. So I think that is going to be, as the tech revolution takes over, the future for us, both in individual care and in terms of kind of group studies. And the individual care is if you have big data on one person and their trajectory through life, then it's very clear to see, you know, everyone's different, and they talk about people when they take medication having different physiological effects. It's the same, in fact, with their own genotype and their age and their gender and their life circumstances. People respond differently. If you have big data that goes over a long time on one person, you can begin to see what's right for that particular person. But then in a group studies, if you featureize aspects of what they do, so how tall are these breaths or long are these breaths, and you can start using cluster analysis. And in these big group data, you can say, well, those that behave in a particular way will have a better outcome than those who behave in another way. And that becomes incredibly useful to improve patient care in the future.
Thank you. Then one last question for Brenda. It is important that clinicians and data scientists are working together. Could you give examples of such partnerships?
So absolutely. I mean, if I consider evidence-based and excellent cardiorespiratory practice, I think of a three-legged stool where you have patient preferences, you have your clinician expertise, and you have your data, your research. And they need to be working together in order for that stool to stand. At the moment, what we see is it's fractionated, and so the legs of the stool are too far apart. And so we're seeing a lot, the researchers are doing one thing, and they're not speaking back to the clinicians, and the real concerns that the clinicians have are not being translated, and the patient preferences aren't being taken into account. And I think with some of the work that we've been doing and been talking about, we can incorporate the patient preferences together with the research and the clinician expertise. And for me, I'm speaking as a clinician scientist, where I'm at the coalface, I'm doing clinical work, seeing the problems in real time, and then addressing them from a research perspective as well and feeding it back. So I think that's one exciting option where you don't have to communicate you are that person or those people, but at the very least we want the researchers to be included as part of the interdisciplinary team as a physiotherapist so that they're speaking the same language. And then one last point, it's a new concept of learning health systems that I think we can incorporate all these digital applications into, whereby good clinical care is incorporated with high quality data collection at the same time. And that speaks to big data, that speaks to collaboration. And so it's not systematically changing management for research in a traditional model, but it's really collecting high quality data by clinicians and then feeding that back into practice. And I think that's really what we're aiming for in the long run.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And thank you for watching PT Worldwide.